us today, shall we? Nobody yet. Ah, there's my first person. Hello, Leanna, Monica, welcome back. Welcome back. Hi, everybody. Debbie, hello. Oh, look at everyone. Hi, everyone. I know, Monica, you're back. Thank you for your email yesterday, Monica. That was so lovely. Hi, everyone. I know I missed you from like an hour ago. Kylie from Wisconsin. Look, this is like my book club. Hi, everyone. Gisela, hello. Oh, it's so nice to see all of you again today. Hi, Wendy. Nice to see you. Oh, man. Shelly Beans. This morning was a lot of fun, wasn't it? You guys, if you're on here and you don't know about book club, we do book club every morning at 9. Saturday to Tuesday, and we have so much fun. Kate, welcome back. Pig City Teachers, I owe you an email. I haven't forgotten about you. Don't worry. Hi, everyone. Oh, you're so lucky you had a nap. I might have a nap today. I'm not going to lie. I've had a hard time sleeping the last couple days. I know. Book club is so fun. You got to join us in book club. We're reading this book. Kids these days. So good. Hey, Kate Campbell. Kate Campbell's in my living room. You're not going to lie. Hi, everybody. So welcome to our first live Q&A. This actually isn't connected to book club at all. This is connected to the learning series that we're doing, Learn From Home, with 5 more minutes. Hi, Tanya from Sundry. Oh, that's right. Tuesday to Saturday. You're right. Saturday, Tuesday. That's so true. So welcome. Welcome to our first live Q&A. And how this really works is, so I am doing a little learning series, home learning tips designed for kids with disabilities. But really, I'm learning they're just good for anybody. And so so we're releasing videos on Tuesday and Thursday. Oh, look who's here. This is Kate Campbell. Hi, Darcy. And this is her new puppy, pandemic puppy named Friday. Hi, Friday. So cute. So she's popping in to say hello. Hi. That's Compost Kate, guys. Like the Compost Kate.
With COVID hair.
With COVID hair and a pandemic puppy. Darcy, I saw you on the book club this morning and I was just like, is that Darcy? So hi, Darcy. Nice to see you. So Tuesday, Thursdays, we are doing video releases for learning tips. There's 2 more coming out this week. And then on Saturdays at 11, which is right now, we are doing Q&A. And so I have, I told people to send me emails or to come here today if you have any questions or comments about the videos that were released this week. And I got one really, really good question that I'm going to respond to today. But even if you have questions, just type them in the little comment box. We're here together for about 15 minutes, and then I'm going to post this video on the YouTube channel, so if there's some really good conversation, you can share it. Don't feel shame, my friend. Don't feel shame, because you know what? The book club is inclusive. We welcome everyone. You don't even need to read the book to be a part of book club, because you know that most of it is updates anyway. Like today, we talked about my new miter saw. I'm just saying. Hi, Damon. Welcome back. Tanis, hello. Okay, so our 2 videos this week were focused on, number 1, continuous learning and what the difference between continuous and distance learning is. And the second video was focused on the importance of teaching, that's right, Danny the miter saw, the importance of educating and teaching our kids about what's going on right now. So just as a really quick recap, if you didn't watch the videos, they're both on my YouTube channel. The very first video was, just come for the updates. The very first video was just a really quick recap, was about how there's so many people who are struggling right now, teachers and parents and kids, support staff, everyone, because there's kind of like we're all this new territory of home learning. We had to learn really, really fast. So like teachers and parents and kids, we all had to learn how to learn new really, really fast. And I think that through that process, one thing that we missed was that we're also navigating a crisis. And so the goals of life when we're navigating a crisis change. And if you know about Maslow's Bloom's hierarchy, right? We can't get to the learning phase unless we know we're safe, unless we have, if we feel like we have our basic needs met. And right now, our whole security level is being negotiated because like there's a worldwide pandemic. Like none of us have experienced this. And so with that, that very first video was just really about giving people permission to take a step back and say, okay, Our job is not to recreate school. Our job is not to recreate the learning that happens in school. Our job right now is to continue learning, okay? And that word continue learning is very, very important, because continue learning means that it doesn't necessarily have to mean that it's new learning that's happening, which was what would be happening at school, but how do we keep kids continuing their learning, which means we focus on the big rocks, which means we focus on keeping kids connected, keeping kids engaged. Those are going to be our really big ones. And so I see a lot of people doing a whole lot of work, but it's doing a lot of work to focus on things that are so beyond what we, bless you to everyone who sneezed. Kylie from Wisconsin, that was Kate. To give ourselves permission to be like, okay, take a step back. How do we keep those two things in mind? Because I'm going to be honest with you, your kids are not going to remember the projects that you designed for them. They're going to remember that they connected with you, and they're going to remember that they engaged with you. Also keep in mind, our parents at home, Maslow before Bloom, that's what I was trying to say. Our parents at home, they are not full-time teachers. Many of them are working full-time from home. Some of them may have even lost their jobs, so we can't expect our families to be replacements for us. And so we also have to take a step back and be like, what's realistic for families? I think it was Pernille Nip that said, for everything you've planned for a day, half it and then half it again, and that's what you can pretty much expect. You know what I mean? Because, and not to mention, what about families that have like multiple grade levels in their house? Like, we have to be really realistic. And so if we can just kind of take a step back and be like, okay, what are the big rocks here? What are people going to remember in 10 years? Stay connected, stay engaged. And so everything we do in this video series is going to be connected to those two ideas. How do we keep kids engaged? How do we keep kids connected? Reminding, like, kids and families. So Anan, what's your name? Anan. Is your name Anan? Let me remind you that teachers are not capable of teaching their own child either. This is killing my relationship. I can imagine. I totally, because it's totally different roles, right? And so I just think to myself, like, I had a really nice little like zoom in with a district north of Edmonton yesterday, and just that reminder, like, we are doing way more. We are doing way more than we need to, and we are exhausting ourselves. I thought my 8-year-old was doing fine in all of this, and I realized this week she wasn't. So we ended up taking this last week off. You guys, it's gonna be okay. And it is hard to teach our own kids. It's so true. Our patience levels are different. All of these things, and it's okay to separate those roles. And so if that video, and you know what, that video is getting so many views because I think it just kind of hit a spot in all of us that we were feeling vulnerable, and we're like, take a breath. It is okay that we're stressed because it's a pandemic. Give yourself a break. Okay, number 2, the second video. The other thing that's really important to know, and because I'm thinking about families and kids with disabilities, is that sometimes, especially kids with complex disabilities, we don't necessarily tell them what's going on. And so this was a really, really important piece of feedback that I learned early in my career, is that we need to make sure that we're making sure kids know why something is happening. And so when I think about kids with disabilities, something that's really important to kids in general, but especially kids with disabilities, is their routine and who they're connected to and predictability, and all of those things have been thrown out the window. And so there's probably a lot of kids who are really trying to figure out, why aren't I going to school? It's not summer. Why, like, take a day in the garden. Totally, your kids will remember that, but kids need to know why. Like, why am I taking a day in the garden with my mom? It's Thursday, I should be at school. And so a big part of this understanding piece is really making sure, what kept coming up and up over and over again is the importance of presuming competence, and being like, even if we think kids aren't understanding, we have to give them the opportunity to understand just in case. And I have never regretted communicating the why to kids, regardless of ability levels, because so often kids can understand at a higher level of comprehension than they can communicate. That's why we read to our kids, like, before they can read. We don't read to babies because we expect them to decode, right? We read to them because we're modeling and teaching them and, like, co-regulating and showing them how to behave during this time, and eventually this is going to be something that we have to do. looking at this pandemic, this is exactly it. When we're communicating to kids why this is happening, we are co-regulating, we are sharing understanding, we are co-learning together. And so this is why, regardless of who's in your house, to really look at age-appropriate ways to teach about what's happening in the world. Now, this leads to the very, very, very good question that I got. And this question said, Shelly, because one thing, Damon, often even if they seem as though they can't understand, they do. They do. And that's what presuming competence is even if you have no idea or have no evidence that someone is understanding something, you're going to presume that they are. Even if you never know, we're going to make the presumption that every single person in our home, in our family, in our classroom, we believe that they can learn. And so it's our job to make sure they have the opportunity to get whatever they get out of it. It's not our job to determine if they understand. It's our job to make sure they have the opportunity to understand. This is like number one, okay? So, but I got a really great question, because another thing that's really near and dear to my heart is age-appropriate resources, okay? So, and this came from the high school that I worked in. I worked with kids age 13 to like 19. And one thing I noticed right away was a lot of the kids who were coming to my classroom were still very, very much connected to like toys and experiences that were not age appropriate, right? So for example, like I had a 17-year-old who loved the Wiggles. And this is a really important question, because someone emailed me and they're just like, but Shelly, what if my 17-year-old does like the Wiggles? Do I stop them? And this is a really important question. Don't stop the Wiggles, but I want to just let you in on a little secret, okay? People will be interested in what they have access to, okay? So part of presuming competences, right, is, okay, if they love the Wiggles, maybe that's just because what they have access to. So what I did with my students is, if they like the Wiggles and Blue's Clues, that tells me that they need to be exposed to more things. Now, the other thing I need to tell you is that there's two things that are important to keep in mind at the same time, okay? There's age-appropriate content, and then there's developmental level. And often we think these go together, but they don't, okay? When a kid is typically developing, okay, they are watching the Wiggles, which is age-appropriate content and developmentally appropriate material. They're going together. That works if kids are typically developing. But a lot of kids with disabilities, they don't follow the same timeline, right? So they might need developmentally appropriate processes, but it doesn't match with their age, okay? So stay with me, okay? So if you look at the developmental approach of the Wiggles or Blue's Clues, what makes people love them, okay? They are bright, they are colorful, they have songs, they're predictable, they are repetitive, okay? All of those things. You can do those things with the Wiggles. You can also do those things with anything. Okay? The best example of this is one thing that I would love to do with my kids in high school is we would make alphabet books. Now, the concept itself of alphabet books is really inappropriate, but the process isn't. It's the very developmentally appropriate. We just would find age-appropriate things. So rather than looking for talking puppets, right, we looked at parachutes. Like, you don't have to learn about apples. You don't have to learn about bunnies. You don't have to learn about talking bears, but you can take those same developmental approaches and apply them to more age-appropriate content, okay? So, the examples that I showed you were really, really good at this. So they took age-appropriate content and applied it in a developmentally appropriate way. So the examples that I showed you, really, really clear language, short sentences, right? The sentence directly matched the picture. Those are very developmentally appropriate concepts, but they didn't use them attached to babies. Now I could do a whole course on this, but what we're gonna take from today is I want you to think about if your kid is over than 7 and is loving Daniel Tiger and is loving the Wiggles, what that means is, and I want you to look at this and be like, what do they like about Daniel Tiger? What do they like about the Wiggles? And how do we take those processes and apply them to a more age-appropriate content? Because I'm going to tell you, I had one little guy, no, seriously, this blew my mind in high school because this is how you can make high school content meaningful. So for example, okay, I had a kid, no, totally. And if you just really love the Wiggles, because don't ever take that away. But you want to make sure that kids are not choosing the Wiggles because that's their only option. Exposure. Thank you. Kate, you want to come tell your Temple Grandin story?
Oh.
Kate's going to tell a little Temple Grandin story. My friends, may I introduce you to Kate Campbell. So this is Kate Campbell. Tell them what you just said.
Hi. I've seen Temple Grandin speak a couple times. Shelley and I once together.
Incredible woman. Look her up.
Mm-hmm. Amazing. And so when I got the opportunity to go again, I went. And at the end of the night, I had been talking to parents, and I realized that it was basically me and Temple and the publishers that were the only people left.
So lucky.
So I went and chatted with her for a while again, and her and I had a great conversation about exposure, which she does talk about in her speeches and her books. Mm-hmm. She says, well, why did I choose cattle? Because I was exposed to it.
Yeah.
If she'd been exposed to something else, maybe she would have had passion in something else. But if she had never been exposed,
you don't even
then
know,
she wouldn't have been able to make that choice for herself.
Yeah.
So our job is not to choose
for them.
Not to decide for them, but to expose our kids, not just our kids with exceptional needs.
Everybody,
every kid. To things, to things in life, and let them choose where their passions are.
Totally. Thanks, Kate. Thank you. So this is a huge thing. And so I'm going to tell you a little story about a little guy I had. He wasn't little. He was in grade 10. Just kidding. His name was Justin. One of my faves. He has Down syndrome. And he loved, who was it that he loved? I think he was a Blue's Clues guy. So he's in like grade 10, 15 years old, loves Blue's Clues. And I'm like, he can't talk to his peers about Blue's Clues. But the thing about Blue's Clues is that Blue's Clues is really good at like search and find and matching and visuals. And I'm like, okay, how do we take these ideas and apply them to high school content? And this is how we got him included in all his classes. So for example, he was in a Science 10 class and they were doing the periodic table of elements, right? And so I'm just like, oh, this is perfect. And so we did that same idea of search and find, and we took the periodic table of elements and found like what are common objects in the world that have this element. And then he had to go do a search and find for copper. He had to go do a search and find for oxygen. And what was amazing about this is that because we made age-appropriate content developmentally appropriate, he loved it, but guess who else could then be a part of that process? His peers, because his peers were all like, oh my goodness, I didn't know that was copper. And so it also kind of forces us to make it accessible through the lens of developmental appropriateness, but in a way, because if we did a Blue's Clues science unit, that's not meaningful to peers. But if we did a developmentally appropriate unit with the content the peers are using, then it's also accessible for the peers. And so this is like the biggest secret of inclusion in high school, is how do we take those developmental concepts and apply them to age-appropriate content, okay? So this question, I'm so glad someone asked this question, because I was just like, let me tell you, if I have a kid who's 22 and loves Blue's Clues, that's going to tell me that I need to expose this 22-year-old to more things that are age appropriate, but developmentally appropriate. But I'm going to tell you, if after exposure, they still love Blue's Clues, I'm going to let them love Blue's Clues. Like, it's not the interest that I have a problem with. The problem is, if that's the only thing they're exposed to, that's actually not a choice. That's our choice, okay? So this is really about exposure. So this is about basically, this is a good question. So is you're thinking across the board for all disabilities or Down syndrome and autism? What I'm talking about is when there is a cognitive gap between the typical development of age and developmental level, when there's some sort of gap, right? So either, like, there's also, have you ever had those kids in your classes who are like so mature and they just, they like totally, they're like 3 years old, but they like are like tell me about Shakespeare. Like whenever there's like this gap between either the content and the developmental level, typical developing kids, like that's how TV shows make their money, is because they align age appropriate content with developmentally appropriate processes. So when we have kids with disabilities where it's like this, right? Either way, that's part of our job for this whole, like, how do we match this? Because one thing that's really important and a way that we can presume competence is to expose kids to age-appropriate things. And so that's why in this second video, it was really important to me that the resources that we choose, this was a really good way to talk about this, to say, are the resources that we're choosing age appropriate, but also developmentally appropriate for our kids, right? Because you can teach about COVID and someone with a disability is going to have so much more connection to that if the person in the resource, whether it's a video or a book, right, looks like them, is the same age as them, is representative of who they are, as opposed to a 17-year-old watching Daniel the Tiger about COVID. There's going to be less connection. And this goes for all kids. The more that they see themselves in what they're learning, the more they're going to be engaged, the more they're going to be connected. And so we could connect this to cultural representation. We could talk about this in terms of gender representation. I mean, I barely learned about women in school, let alone queer people. Do you know what I mean? And so it's just kind of like, what does your family look like? What do they represent? And so the resources that we're bringing in, if we want to teach a kid a new skill or educate them about something that's really important, we want to see that representation in those resources, but we also want to consider that cognitive, like that developmental and that age appropriateness. Does that kind of make sense? It's something that I'm really passionate about. I don't know if you can tell, but this is a big kind of theory. Yes, exactly. Representing your identity, right? Like if you can see yourself in what you're learning, you're going to engage. And so that's what kind of the goal of that second video was. But I love that this question got asked, because I get this question all the time. And I actually think that this kind of like negotiating is how we can make inclusion happen in the upper grades, is use age appropriate content in developmentally appropriate ways. So stay tuned for that book that's going to come out one day. Seriously, I need a ghostwriter. Okay, so those are the two videos this week. I'm going to be doing some filming today for the two videos coming up this week, which I'm very excited about. Before we wrap up, are there any questions from the crew? Or do you guys have any questions that are coming up for you? Or are you here for the party? Is there any other questions you have or comments? Yeah, Melissa, you want to be my ghostwriter? Totally. Oh, man. No? Well, listen. About 24 years ago, I worked in the rec therapy program at a nursing home. I worked with people with Alzheimer's, and the puzzles they could do were little kids' puzzles. Okay, Kylie, this is a great example, okay? Why do people like little kids' puzzles? Okay? Because the pieces are big. You don't need fine motor skills, right? The picture is really, really clear. And so they probably liked the processes of those puzzles because they were accessible for little hands that don't have a hard time with fine motor skills, okay? So now imagine, what if we made puzzles with big pieces that were really, really easy to move around, but the picture wasn't of a talking bunny, it was of their grandchildren, right? So that's a perfect example of developmentally appropriate, but also age appropriate. You see it? You see it? Okay, Mama Holt, 77. Struggle to help families with kids with ADHD. Okay, so I have ADHD, and I'm going to tell you what helps me, okay? Lots of breaks, lots and lots and oh, you might have to make them, Kylie. That's the problem. These things don't exist anywhere. You have to make them. Okay, number one, lots of breaks. How I manage getting work done is I do, and this might be less for your kids, but thinking about, I do an hour on and an hour off. So I do an hour of work, and then I do an hour of something that gets me moving. So I'm doing gardening, okay? So this has been working for me for the last few weeks, and I've gotten more done. So for little guys, though, I kind of think about someone's age, right? So if they're kind of like 13, do 13 minutes on and 13 minutes off, and make that 13 minutes off something that isn't just motivating, but something that's really balancing. We were talking about this in book club today, to be like, this is more, okay, so then how you come back? Okay, so there's an app, it's called Flat Tomato, okay? And it's a Pomodoro. I just learned about this, right? So for example, every time you go through a workstation, you get a badge, Okay, and so you set a goal for the day. So I do like an hour of work and then an hour of play, right? But every time I finish a work sequence, I get a badge. And so then then the badge is a tomato, okay? And so I set a goal every day to be like, okay, I'm gonna get 4 tomatoes today. And so having that goal is motivating for me to get back on track. Now, I wouldn't suggest an hour time frame, but even just to say, okay, so what are my goals of today? What do I have to get done? How many tomatoes do I think it's gonna take? Right? And when am I going to space out my day? When am I going to make this plan? Am I going to do 15 minutes on, 15 minutes off? What am I going to do during that 15 minutes? So that it's not just about doing it because someone told you to, but doing it because you've set a goal for yourself. The other way that kids are going to be really engaged is if they know the goal of the activity that they're doing. Okay? So it's not even just that they're finishing a worksheet, but what goal is this worksheet going to actually help them to meet? If they know the why, they're going to engage for sure. That's the buy-in. And if they still aren't buying in, find a new activity. I'm going to be real honest with you, especially right now. Like, I might have a different answer if we weren't in a pandemic, but if you are really, really struggling, I would say get a different activity. Often ADHD, kids with ADHD have a lot of strengths and a lot of movement activities, so really incorporating a lot of movement into the activity, so it's not a lot of sit down and a lot of screen time. Like, get kids outside. Choice is going to help kids with ADHD. First then, actually, secret, Tanya. Secret, one of the strategies this week is going to be first then. That's going to be one of my videos. So yeah, lots of strengths. So build those strengths in. And then, because I always think if kids aren't choosing to come back, it's because there's a better option. So how do we make them coming back as good, if not better, an option than what they were doing? And how we do that is by pulling in their strengths. Pulling them in. Yeah, and give them choices to choose from. Oh my goodness, there's just so many exciting things. Okay, friends, those are really good questions for today. Listen. If you have any other questions, what I want you to do is I want you to send me an email. I'm going to put it right down here. Okay, ready? SHELLEYMORE79@gmail.com. Okay? And if any questions come up that you want answers, I want you to email me. And then what I can do is, because we're going to come back together next Saturday at 11, and we can, and I'll bring up those questions. I'm going to bring up all the questions that people answer me, and I'll answer them on here. This has been really, really fun. No, this is so good. Bring your questions in. New video released on Tuesday. I'm trying to get the premieres to happen at 10:30 a.m. PST. So tell your friends, tell them to join me. I'm also filming this session. So if you want to share this conversation with other people, it's going to be on my YouTube channel. If you Google just 5 more minutes. Friends, that was half an hour. You did a great job. I appreciate you. You're doing hard work. Take a big breath. Shoulders down, head up. You're amazing. I will see you next Saturday. Or if you're in book club, I'll see you on Tuesday. Bye, everybody.